Kokanee.
I caught a fish.
Yeah, the downrigger, the weight, it drops it to a certain depth, and that's what the fish finder is for, is to find the depth where the fish are at, right? And then the downrigger, we drop the weight to...
That is correct. This is our Downrigger Ball. On the end of the Downrigger Ball, there's a release clip. And you can have different lengths of release lines. This is the release clip. This is what's going to hold our fishing line.
Huh.
And that goes to our fishing rod. So we're going to put this in the water. And when we get trolling, we're going to put our line out behind the boat, and then we're going to hook up our line to the downrigger, and this will actually go down. So you can this actually goes down in the water. So you can actually see it, and we'll drop it down, and we can raise it up. So we'll get going.
And that is your little trolling motor.
Yes.
That's electric?
Yes, we have an electric trolling motor.
Oh.
We have our gas motor. The electric helps us go slower. It's also quieter. For example, right now we're going 1.5 miles per hour, 1.6.
Okay.
And Kokanee, you can actually go as low as 1 mile an hour. Some guys go 0.8. So right now I'm slowing us down, and the boat is slowing down. We're at 1.4, 1.3. So this is a good speed to start at if we're not sure what they're going at. 1.3, 1.4. Right now we're going 1.2. So we can actually hit them at 1.2 as well.
Okay.
This is our line counter reel. I just picked this up. This is called a Diawa Lexa. This is the bigger size. This is a 400. Most people use a 300. There's also 100s that I've seen that are working pretty good. This is your star drag. So when we hook a kokanee and I tell you to loosen your drag, this is your drag here. And what that does, when you move your star drag, it enables the fish to pull line off the reel. Okay. With kokanee, we want to make sure that they're able to pull line off the reel, so that we're not pulling this hook out of their mouth, because they have a really soft mouth. So you want to be really careful of that. Now last night I chose this setup to start with. So we have a Dodger. This is our Dodger. And what this does is this Dodger, as we're pulling it through the water, this Dodger actually kicks. It kicks like this.
Okay.
And it actually, when it goes, it's sending out a sound wave. And the kokanee are actually hearing this, and they're coming in to investigate what this is. And then they see this little hoochie with the spinner, and they can even hear the vibration from the spinner. They hear this thing and see this thing kicking around. So then they line up behind this, and then you have your corn or your maggots or your bait, and they can smell it and they attack it. And we usually have the hook sticking out at the end because they usually short strike it. They don't really bite the lure all completely, so we want to be able to get them at the very end. So that's our setup. That's what we're going to put behind the boat today. So what we'll do is we'll choose what we think might be working for the day. And we have scented corn. This is garlic bloody tuna. It smells really garlicky. I've actually put a couple cloves of garlic in there as well, so it helps it smell. There's different scents you can use for kokanee, and it's kind of an irritant. They don't really like the smell of it, so they come and they
strike it to try and get rid of it?
Yeah. Most of the time kokanee aren't actually, they're not actually feeding on our lures. They can. People do really well with chironomids, and you'll see fly fishermen, they will chironomid fish. And I have caught kokanee ice fishing that have had shrimp in them. So they do eat other things, but for the most part they're eating the plankton in the water. So we have our setup here. Here's our line counter reel. On the side of the line counter, before we get moving, we're going to press this little black button, and it zeroes out where we're at. So now we're going to get trolling, and I'm going to press the lever that releases the spool, and I keep my thumb on the spool, and I'm going to just slowly let the line out. Now, because today we're going to try different techniques, I don't know how deep the kokanee are here, we're going to come up to 8 feet. We're going to go down to 12. We're going to go down to 30. I'm going to have a further setback. And setback just refers to how far behind the boat you are. So that's going to count, and we're going to go to about 75.
Okay.
Right now we're at 55.
And that's how far the line is dragging.
That's how
behind
far
the
back
boat.
it is. So this is valuable when you're kokanee fishing because you can put that right back to the same distance behind the boat that it was the last time. So put in my rod holder. Now I'm going to grab my release clip that we talked about.
Okay.
And I'm going to clip it in. So I clip my line from my rod into the release clip, and I let it go. Okay, so it's ready to go down to where we want to go. People are catching them at 30, so we're going to go down to 30 feet. So we're going to make sure there's no line wrapped around our rod tip. We're going to release the spool and keep our thumb on this. This is very important. You don't let your thumb off of the spool. Because if you let your thumb off, this is going to bird's nest and it's going to cause all sorts of knots. So now we're going to put our downrigger ball down and we're going to slowly let it go from the rod. We're going to go down to 30 feet. Our downrigger has a counter on it as well, just like the line counter reel.
Okay.
So the downrigger can put us right back into the exact same spot.
It's normal for the rod to bend like that. So how do you tell when you actually get a fish on the line?
Well, we're using the electric motor today, so you're going to see that rod bouncing pretty good.
Okay.
These fish here are pretty scrappy, so we'll be able to see it bouncing. We do crank it down quite a bit, and the reason for this is we want that line from our rod tip right down to that release clip. We want it as tight as possible. If it's too loose, then your line's actually going to have a bow. Picture your line going down, you want it straight down. If not, your line's going to be bent like this in the water and then go out. And if that's the case, if a fish bites and you pop that release clip, you're going to have to reel it down to get the fish on. So it just takes longer.
Okay.
So we're at 30 feet there. We'll get our other one ready. This other one is the same type of line counter reel. This is just the smaller one. This is the Diawa Lexa 300. So we bought these Diawa Lexas this year. They're amazing. They work really well, very smooth. Line counter, we're going to reset it. We should actually do that before we put our line out. Now, I've got 2 different dodgers and 2 different lures. I'm also going to go with 2 different types of scents because I don't know what the fish want. They're going to tell me if they like a certain lure or a certain scent. And so as we kind of figure it out throughout the day, we'll be able to figure out what they want. So this one here.
Oh, so coming first probably wasn't the best thing.
Coming first is probably not the best choice. Everyone else kind of had that figured out. So this here.
Me being the novice fisherman.
This is anise or... This is also an irritant. It smells really good. I love the smell of it.
I guess if we don't catch any fish and we get really hungry, we can always eat that.
Yeah, you might get sick, but yeah, you could. What we're using on this setup is we are using a longer leader because this lure here has its own action. This dodger here will kick in the water like we talked about, and it's going to send out a signal. This lure, this little bill, they call it a wiggle bill, it catches water and it actually moves around erratically all over the place. And that just drives these kokanee crazy. They just can't resist it, and they come in and they smack that corn at the end of the hook. See that? So we got a little bit of a spacing on that hook. They see that little piece of corn and they target that corn. Actually, not very often they're not really targeting the lure. They're just targeting that little piece of corn there. So for the most part, you usually only get them right on the end.
Does that make them harder to reel in, easier?
No, it makes it easier. If they're in the mouth, it's easier. Sometimes they'll swipe at it, and if they swipe at your lure, sometimes they will. Sometimes they'll get it in the side, and they're really difficult to reel in when they're in the side. So we'll go to this side.
And you can't keep them when they're in the side as well, right?
No, when they snag themselves or you catch a snag fish, you have to release them. So this is my Scotty 1085. I've got a review on it. Absolutely loving these things. I bought the swivel base. This is a swivel base. This is the pedestal mount. So you buy different pieces from Scotty to make your life easier out on the water. You lift this up, hold on to the boom, and you touch the swivel base, you open it up, you actually rotate your downrigger out. Now why I bought that was for two reasons, for traveling, but when you're on a dock, it's really nice to be able to swing the downriggers in so you're not hitting the dock with your downrigger. Scotty does make a stop on these. Spin it around here. They make a little red stop where you can flick this like this, and that will hold the downrigger. But I have had these stops come out if you're going down the road with it. I mean, realistically, you just take your downrigger off and you're fine. But I don't use that stop. I use the swivel base now.
Okay, and it's got some kind of warning or some kind of instructions on that?
Yeah, there is some warning not to pinch yourself in here because you have a hinge point, so you want to be careful that you don't pinch yourself inside there. That's a good point. We have a great combination here, and this is pairing up nicely. We have our line counter reel, and this rod is actually designed specifically, this is from Luhr Jensen. It's designed specifically for kokanee. It's a downrigger kokanee rod. It's super sensitive. It absorbs a lot of the fight from the kokanee so that it doesn't pull the hook out of their mouth. Years ago, people would fish with a rubber snubber, which is like a little elastic, and that was actually on your line, and that elastic did the same thing and absorbed the pull from the kokanee. The next thing is to check the action before you send this thing out. Check the action of your dodger and your lure in the water to make sure it's doing what you want it to do or what it should do. You can actually see the dodger moving in the water. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera. So you put your rod tip in the water and you can actually watch what's going on. I hope you can see that in the camera. And you just take a look at it. Speed your boat up, make sure it's doing what it needs to do. Now, sometimes certain dodgers will run at different speeds. So you want to be careful and make sure you have the right dodger for the right speed that you're trying to target. The dodgers that we're using that are on this line that I'm putting out, this dodger can run at fast speeds, but if you put a bend in it, a lot of people put an actual bend in these dodgers, the Mack Sling blades or any type of blade like that, you can bend them, but if you bend them too much, the faster speeds, the ones that are bent, the dodger will roll. So the dodger needs to be straighter if you want to run at a faster speed. So there's lots to think about, lots to know, lots to learn. So this one, same thing. This one is at 75 feet as well. Now there's two things that are going on here. We know exactly where we're at, but we also have both rods. I'm going to have them both at the same depth. So this release clip is on a little bit of a longer release. I'm going to set my line into the release clip. I can show you a video of that, close-up video of that later. I think it's spun around on itself. Sometimes they roll around on themselves, and if they do that, they actually don't come out. You have to reel the downrigger up and release them yourself. Okay, so very slowly again, we're going to make sure we release it. Make sure our rod tip is good. We're going to put it down. But what we're doing now is we've got two line counter reels. We're 75 feet behind the boat, so we're the same distance back. Both of these are at 30 feet, so we know we're at the same distance down. So essentially what we're doing is we are at the exact same depth back and the exact same depth down, and it's creating like two fish swimming.
Yes, and two different sets as well. Two
different sets. So the kokanee, they hear that and they're attracted to it, and you've kind of created a school mentality where these kokanee come in and think there's a few other kokanee in the area. They think it's another fish swimming, so they can hear that in the area. So nothing yet. Right now, what I've decided to do, we were going to fish that bay, but we'll turn around and come fish that bay in a minute. What I'm doing right now, and I've started doing it again this year, is a technique I use with my electric trolling motor. We are actually trolling with the wind. You use your trolling motor to keep you straight. Now, a lot of people say with kokanee fishing you can do a lot of S-turns, and that will speed one rod up and slow the other one down. But right now what we're doing is we're using our electric motor and these little gusts of wind. Can you feel the wind that's starting to push us? So right now we're doing 1.2 miles per hour. And if it stays consistent, then I'm going to have to start playing with the motor. And it's fairly consistent. I'm not marking any fish here though, but that doesn't mean they're not down there, because our fish finder is like a cone. Okay? Our fish finder looks down, but it actually looks down as a cone. And so if there's fish that are out of that cone, it's not going to pick them up. It doesn't mean that they're not down there. We just have to be over top of them for it to register what's going on. After we get to the end of our drift, because we have a little bit of wind pushing us, I'm going to fire up the gas motor, and I'm going to bring us up the lake with the gas motor. It's easier to control the boat with the gas motor, and when you're pushing against the wind, you can help keep your speed down.
Okay.
So I am marking fish now. My fish finder has, in the auto range, my fish finder has picked up my Downrigger balls. This line here, if you can see it, those are my Downrigger balls. So your fish finder will read your Downrigger balls, and I've had to manually set my depth here on my fish finder. Right now, I like to split the difference. If I'm fishing 30 feet, I like to go 60 on a manual fish finder. I like to go to double it, at least. Now we're marking a couple fish down there, and they're more like 25. There is one fish at 30. So the wind has pushed us up a little bit. We're doing 1.4 miles per hour right now.
So will the fish finder determine whether they're small fish or whether they're big fish? Or they're just fish?
Sometimes it can, depending on their air bladder. That's one important thing to talk about. Most fish finders will pick up a kokanee, and it'll show them a little bit of red in the signature of the fish. And that's because a kokanee has a bigger air bladder than a trout, and so it will actually register that air bladder. It's actually pretty cool stuff.
Okay.
So we're marking some now below 30 feet. So they're kind of all over. They're kind of scattered. So we'll just speed the boat up a little bit. Sometimes if you speed up, you can get a hit if you're getting followed. And then we'll slow it down. So you always want to be changing something. You're either going to be speeding up, you're going to be turning, which does the same thing. Just change something. I'll lift the Downrigger balls up. We're fishing a little lazily right now until we can figure out where these fish are. But once we really start getting into these schools of fish, we're really going to push them. We're going to push what they want. There are a lot of YouTube videos out there where kokanee will actually follow our gear. So we could actually be trolling right now, and if we're not changing anything to change their behavior, then they won't change their behavior. They'll just, our lure will be here and they'll just follow it.
They'll just follow behind.
Constantly follow, and they won't do nothing. But if we speed it up a bit, then they'll smack it.
Yeah, you either have to irritate them or
yeah,
make them happy, please them in some way.
Yeah. It's that instinct too, right? I mean, something's getting away from them. They don't want that, so they'll chase it and they'll hit it.
Okay.
So that basically covers a lot of the stuff that we're going to be doing today.
All right. So now it's hurry up and wait.
Now it's hurry up and wait. Now I'm going to start really working it. It looks like I got one active fish. So I am going to mark on my Garmin. I have a little mark feature. I'm going to press it, and I don't need to edit the waypoint. I've actually marked that fish. That's actually a really good signature on here. So we got a pretty good fish down there. That being said, that could also be a lake trout. Lake trout do show up quite a bit bigger. So we'll have to see. And my fish finder actually shows me that it looked like it went right back down. So it came up and it came down. But we're getting into quite a few fish right now. So we're going to have to figure out if we can get these things to bite.